Think about the last promise you made to yourself and broke, the early morning you slept through, the goal you announced with excitement and quietly abandoned weeks later. That moment stung, didn't it? Not because the task was so important, but because deep down, it felt like proof that you can't be trusted to follow through on your own word. Here is the truth nobody tells you. That feeling is not permanent, and it was never really about willpower. It was about never having a clear, honest guide for how real discipline gets built, one small choice at a time. What you are about to hear will walk you through exactly that: how to quiet the excuses, build habits that actually stick, and become someone who keeps promises to themselves. Keep listening, because this could be the moment everything starts to shift. Chapter 1. Master your mind before you try to master your life. There is a moment, quiet and unnoticed, that happens before every single choice you make. It happens before you hit snooze or get out of bed. It happens before you open your phone or open a book. It happens before you speak the sharp words you later regret or hold your tongue instead. That moment is where your entire life is actually built. Not in the big decisions you make once a year, but in this tiny, invisible space between a thought and an action. Most people never see this space. They live entirely on autopilot, reacting to whatever their mind throws at them, believing every thought that passes through their head is true and urgent and must be obeyed. This is the deepest form of slavery a person can experience, and most never even know they are living inside it. Self-discipline does not begin with your habits. It does not begin with your morning routine, or your workout schedule, or your diet. Those things matter, and we will get to them, but they are the fruit, not the root. The root is your mind. If you try to build discipline in your actions while your mind remains chaotic, undisciplined, and reactive, you are building a house on sand. It will look good for a while. Then the first storm will come, and everything will collapse. This is why so many people start strong and quit fast. They attack the surface of their life without ever touching the source. The source is always the mind. Think about the last time you broke a promise to yourself. Maybe you said you would wake up early, and you didn't. Maybe you said you would stop eating certain foods, and you gave in within a day. Maybe you said this would be the year you finally build the business, write the book, get in shape, save the money, and then weeks passed and nothing changed. In that moment of failure, you probably blamed your willpower. You told yourself you are lazy, weak, or simply not built for discipline. But this is a lie your mind told you, and you believed it without question. The truth is far simpler and far more empowering. You did not fail because you lack willpower. You failed because you never trained your mind to be the one giving the orders. Instead, you let your mind's oldest and laziest habits give the orders, and you followed like a soldier, taking commands from an untrained, panicking officer. Here is something that will change how you see yourself forever, if you let it sink in. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices the thoughts. There is a difference between the voice in your head that says, "This is hard, quit, go back to bed, eat the food, skip the workout," and the part of you that is aware of that voice. That awareness is the real you. The voice is just noise, old patterns, fear dressed up as logic, comfort disguised as wisdom. The moment you understand this difference, you gain the power to disobey the voice. You realize you do not have to do what your mind says just because your mind said it. This single realization is the beginning of real self-mastery. Ancient thinkers understood this truth long before modern psychology gave it fancy names. They taught that a person who cannot govern their own mind will never truly govern their own life, no matter how much money, status, or success they gather. A man could conquer nations and still be a slave to his temper. A woman could build an empire and still be ruled by fear of what others think of her. External achievement means nothing if the internal world remains chaotic. This is not pessimism, this is clarity. And clarity is the first gift that comes from learning to master your mind. So how do you actually do this? How do you take control of something as slippery and constant as your own thinking? It starts with a practice most people ignore because it looks too simple to matter. It starts with watching your thoughts without immediately obeying them. Try this today. The next time a thought tells you to quit something, do not argue with it, and do not obey it immediately. Just notice it. Say to yourself, quietly, there is that thought again. That is it. You are not fighting the thought. You are not suppressing it. You are simply refusing to let it drive the car without your permission. Over time, this small practice builds an inner distance between you and your impulses. That distance is where your power lives. Another practical tool is learning to question the voice that resists effort. When your mind says, "I can't," ask it directly, "Is that true, or is that just uncomfortable?" These are two very different things, and your mind will often blur them together to protect you from discomfort. Discomfort is not danger. Your body evolved to avoid pain because pain used to mean death. But today, most of the pain you feel when facing a hard task is not real danger. It is simply unfamiliar effort. Your mind mislabels this as a threat, and if you believe it, you will retreat every single time life asks something difficult of you. Learning to separate real danger from simple discomfort is one of the most important skills a disciplined person can develop. Let's talk about self-talk, because the words you say to yourself in private moments shape the person you become in public ones. Most people speak to themselves with more cruelty than they would ever speak to a friend. They call themselves stupid for a small mistake. They call themselves weak for feeling tired. They call themselves failures for one bad day. This inner cruelty does not create discipline. It creates shame, and shame does not build strong people. It breaks them slowly from the inside. Discipline is not built through self-hatred. It is built through self-respect. Respect sounds like this: "That was hard, and I still showed up." Shame sounds like this: "I'm pathetic for struggling with something so simple." One voice builds you, the other one erodes you. You get to choose which voice you feed, every single day, through the words you use when no one else is listening. There is also a practice that ancient wisdom keepers relied on heavily, and it is still one of the most powerful tools available today. It is the practice of preparing your mind in advance for difficulty. Most people are shocked and destabilized when hard things happen because they never expected hard things to happen. But difficulty is not an accident in life. It is the baseline condition of being alive. Every single day carries the possibility of frustration, fatigue, rejection, and disappointment. If you expect an easy day and get a hard one, you will feel like life is attacking you personally. But if you expect a hard day and it turns out easier than expected, you will feel strong, prepared, and grateful. This is not negative thinking. This is realistic thinking, and realistic thinking is the foundation of real mental toughness. Each morning, take 30 seconds and mentally prepare for resistance. Tell yourself, today will likely bring moments where I want to quit, and I already know that quitting will not be a real option. This simple mental rehearsal removes the shock value from difficulty when it actually arrives. Now let's bring this into real life, because wisdom without application is just entertainment. Imagine you are trying to build a habit of exercising every morning. On day 1, motivation is high, and you jump out of bed with excitement. By day 5, the excitement is gone, and your mind starts negotiating. It says, "Just skip today, you're tired, you can start again tomorrow." This is the exact moment where mind mastery either saves you or fails you. If you have trained yourself to notice this voice instead of obeying it instantly, you can respond differently. You can say, "I hear you, mind, and we're still going." You get up anyway, not because you feel motivated, but because you have decided that your actions are no longer controlled by your feelings. This is the entire secret behind people who seem to have superhuman discipline. They are not immune to resistance. They have simply learned to act despite it, instead of waiting for it to disappear before they move. The same principle applies to your emotional reactions with other people. Imagine someone says something disrespectful to you. Your mind immediately produces anger and the urge to respond harshly. If you are not trained, you will explode instantly and regret it later. But if you have practiced the pause between thought and action, you can notice the anger rising, take one slow breath, and choose your response instead of reacting blindly. This does not mean you become passive or weak. It means your response comes from strength and choice, not from being hijacked by a temporary emotional storm. People who master their minds are not people who never feel strong emotions. They are people who no longer let those emotions drive the vehicle of their behavior. Understand this deeply. Every act of discipline in your life, from waking up early to staying calm under pressure, to saying no to short-term pleasure for the sake of long-term growth, all of it starts in this same internal battlefield. The battlefield is not out there in the world. It is inside your own skull, in the space between stimulus and response. Whoever controls that space controls the entire direction of a life. This is why some people with very little in terms of resources build extraordinary lives, while others with every advantage waste their potential completely. The difference was never external circumstances. The difference was always what happened in that private, invisible moment of choice. You may be reading this and thinking about all the years you spent reacting instead of choosing, all the promises broken, all the potential left unused. Do not let this become another source of shame. Every master of self-discipline you have ever admired once stood exactly where you are standing now, untrained, reactive, and unsure if change was even possible for them. The difference between them and everyone else who stayed stuck is not talent, it is not luck. It is the simple decision, to start training the mind, one moment at a time, one thought at a time, one choice at a time. Starting today, practice this. Several times throughout your day, pause and ask yourself one question: am I about to act from choice, or am I about to react from impulse? You do not need to change your entire life in one sitting. You only need to win this one moment, then the next one, then the one after that. Discipline is never built in a single dramatic burst of willpower. It is built quietly, moment by moment, through thousands of small internal victories that no one else will ever see, but that you will feel in your bones over time. Your mind can be your greatest ally or your most convincing enemy, and the difference depends entirely on whether you are training it or being trained by it. Every person who has ever built a disciplined, powerful, meaningful life first learned to win this internal war before they won anything visible in the outside world. This is where your transformation begins, not tomorrow, not when circumstances improve, not when motivation arrives. It begins right now, in this exact moment, with the simple decision to stop being ruled by your thoughts and start becoming the one who rules them. Chapter 2. Build unbreakable habits that shape your future daily. Every life you have ever admired was not built in a single decision. It was built brick by brick, through actions repeated so many times, they stopped requiring thought. This is the quiet truth behind every strong body, every successful career, every peaceful home, and every person who seems to have their life together. They did not stumble into it, they built it, one repeated action at a time, until that action became part of who they are. This is the power of habit, and it is far greater than most people ever realize. Here is something worth sitting with for a moment. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. You can write down the most inspiring goal in the world, hang it on your wall, repeat it to yourself every morning, and still end up exactly where your daily patterns take you. Goals live in the future. Habits live in the present, and the present is the only place where real life actually happens. This is why so many people set incredible goals every January and abandon them by February. They focused all their energy on the destination and none of it on the vehicle that was supposed to get them there. Think about your current life for a moment, honestly. Your body, your finances, your relationships, your daily mood, all of it is the direct result of habits you have already built, whether you built them on purpose or by accident. Most people build their habits by accident. They fall into patterns of scrolling, snacking, complaining, and putting things off, not because they chose these patterns deliberately, but because no one ever taught them that patterns can be chosen at all. Once you understand that habits are built, not born, everything changes. You stop seeing your current struggles as fixed personality traits and start seeing them as patterns that can be replaced with better ones. Let's get practical, because understanding this without acting on it changes nothing. A habit is made of 3 parts, and once you can see these parts clearly, you can start rebuilding your life piece by piece. First, there is a cue, something that triggers the behavior. Second, there is the action itself. Third, there is a reward, something that makes your brain want to repeat the action again. Every bad habit you have ever struggled to break follows this exact structure, and every good habit you want to build must follow it too. If you want to stop scrolling your phone late at night, you cannot just tell yourself to stop. You need to notice what cue triggers the scrolling, and you need to give yourself a different reward that satisfies the same need in a healthier way. Now here is where most people go wrong, and it is worth naming clearly. They try to change too much at once. They wake up one day feeling inspired and decide to fix their diet, start exercising daily, wake up at 5 in the morning, read for an hour, meditate, quit sugar, and build a business, all starting tomorrow. This never works, and it is not because these people lack discipline. It is because willpower is a limited resource, and trying to overhaul your entire identity overnight guarantees collapse within days. The people who build lasting change do the opposite. They choose one small habit, so small it feels almost embarrassing, and they repeat it until it becomes automatic before adding the next one. Consider the habit of exercise. Someone who has never worked out in their life does not need to commit to an hour in the gym every single day. That commitment sounds impressive, but it rarely survives contact with a busy, tired, unmotivated Tuesday. Instead, the smarter path is to commit to 5 minutes. 5 minutes of movement, every day, no matter what. This sounds too small to matter, and that is exactly why it works. 5 minutes does not require motivation. It does not require perfect conditions. It simply requires showing up. And here is the secret nobody tells you. Once you show up for 5 minutes, you will often keep going far longer, because starting was the only real barrier. The habit was never about willpower. It was about lowering the entry cost so low that skipping it becomes harder than doing it. Consistency matters more than intensity, and this idea needs to be repeated until it replaces the old belief that discipline means suffering. A person who exercises for 10 minutes every single day for a year will be stronger, healthier, and more disciplined than a person who exercises for 2 intense hours once a week and skips the rest. The small daily action compounds. It builds identity. Each time you complete a small habit, you are not just improving your body or your skill, you are sending yourself a quiet message that says, "I am someone who follows through." Over months and years, this message becomes your identity, and identity is far more powerful than motivation, because identity does not require you to feel inspired. It simply requires you to act like the person you have decided to become. This brings us to one of the most important shifts in how to think about habits. Stop focusing only on what you want to achieve, and start focusing on who you want to become. If your goal is to write a book, do not simply tell yourself, "I want to write a book." Tell yourself, "I am becoming a writer." Then ask what a writer does daily. A writer writes, even on days when the words feel clumsy and uninspired. Every time you sit down and write, even for 10 minutes, you are casting a vote for the identity of a writer. Every time you skip it, you are casting a vote for the opposite identity. Neither vote destroys you completely, but over time, the votes add up, and eventually the majority determines who you actually are. Environment plays a bigger role in habit building than most people admit. You can have strong intentions and still fail consistently if your environment is working against you. If your phone is sitting next to your bed, you will check it before sleep and after waking, no matter how many times you promise yourself you won't. If unhealthy food fills your kitchen, you will eventually eat it, regardless of how strong your willpower felt in the grocery store. The most disciplined people are not necessarily the ones with superhuman willpower. Often, they are the ones who design their environment so carefully that the right choice becomes the easiest choice, and the wrong choice becomes just inconvenient enough to avoid. Put your running shoes by the door. Keep a book on your pillow instead of your phone. Remove tempting distractions from the room where you need to focus. These are not small tricks. They are the architecture of a disciplined life. There will be days when you break the habit. This is not failure, no matter what the harsh voice in your head tries to tell you. The real danger is not missing one day. The real danger is the story you tell yourself after missing one day. Many people miss a single workout, a single morning routine, a single deadline, and their mind immediately says, "You've ruined it. You might as well quit completely." This thinking destroys more habits than laziness ever could. A single missed day is a data point, nothing more. It becomes a pattern only if you allow the story of failure to convince you to give up entirely. The rule to hold on to is simple. Never miss twice in a row. Miss once if life happens, but do not let one missed day become an excuse to abandon weeks of progress. Time plays a role that most people underestimate. Habits do not feel powerful in the moment they are built. On any single day, going for a short walk or reading 10 pages feels almost insignificant compared to the size of your dreams. This is exactly why most people quit early. They compare the small daily action to the large future goal and feel discouraged by the gap. But habits are not judged by a single day. They are judged by what they become after 1 year, 5 years, 10 years of repetition. The person who reads 10 pages daily reads over 3,000 pages in a year. The person who saves a small amount consistently builds real wealth over time. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not closed by dramatic occasional bursts of effort. It is closed quietly, daily, through habits so consistent they eventually feel like breathing. Understand that every habit you build today is a message sent directly to your future self. The habits you choose now are quietly writing the story of who you will become in the months and years ahead. You do not need to transform overnight. You need to choose one small action, repeat it with patience, and trust the process even when it feels invisible. This is how ordinary days become an extraordinary life, not through dramatic leaps, but through the steady, unbreakable rhythm of showing up again and again, until discipline stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like who you simply are. Chapter 3. Conquer procrastination by taking small, consistent action steps. There is a particular kind of pain that almost everyone knows but rarely talks about honestly. It is the pain of knowing exactly what you should be doing, having every ability required to do it, and still not doing it. Not because you lack skill, not because you lack time, but because something inside you keeps finding one more reason to wait. This is procrastination, and it is not laziness, no matter how many people insist otherwise. Laziness is the absence of desire to act. Procrastination is often the opposite. You want to act, you care about the outcome, and yet you still delay. That contradiction is what makes it so exhausting. The task you have been avoiding is rarely the real problem. The real problem is almost always the feeling that shows up the moment you think about starting. Maybe it is the fear of doing it badly. Maybe it is the discomfort of facing something unfamiliar. Maybe it is the quiet worry that if you actually try your hardest and still fail, you will have no excuses left. Procrastination often protects you from that fear. As long as you have not truly started, you can still tell yourself you would have succeeded if you had. The moment you begin, that comfortable illusion disappears. This is why so many capable people avoid starting the very things that matter most to them. It is not the task they are running from. It is the possibility of an honest result. Once you understand this, procrastination stops looking like a character flaw and starts looking like a signal. It tells you exactly where your fear is hiding. Instead of fighting yourself for delaying, get curious about why. Ask directly, what am I actually afraid of here? Is it judgment? Is it failure? Is it the size of the task itself? Naming the fear takes away much of its power, because fear grows enormous in the dark and shrinks the moment you look directly at it. Now let's talk about the tool that breaks procrastination faster than any amount of motivation ever could, and it has nothing to do with feeling ready. It is the practice of shrinking the task until starting becomes almost impossible to avoid. Most people postpone big tasks because their mind pictures the entire mountain at once. Write the whole book, build the whole business, clean the whole house. Of course, this feels overwhelming, and overwhelm is one of procrastination's favorite hiding spots. The fix is to stop looking at the mountain and instead look only at the first small step in front of you. Not the whole book, just one paragraph. Not the whole business, just one email. Not the whole house, just one drawer. The task shrinks, the resistance shrinks with it, and suddenly starting feels manageable instead of terrifying. There is a simple rule worth carrying with you for the rest of your life, and it sounds almost too basic to matter, yet it changes everything once applied consistently. Commit to just 2 minutes, not 2 hours, not the whole task, just 2 minutes of honest effort. Tell yourself you are allowed to stop after that if you truly want to. This works because the hardest part of any task is rarely the task itself. The hardest part is crossing the invisible line between not doing it and doing it. Once you cross that line, momentum takes over far more often than not. You sit down to write one sentence and end up writing for 20 minutes. You open the gym app to plan a walk and end up walking for half an hour. The 2-minute rule is not a trick to fool yourself. It is a way of removing the emotional weight from starting, so your mind stops treating the task like a threat. Action changes how you feel far more reliably than feelings change your willingness to act. Most people wait to feel motivated before they begin, believing motivation comes first and action follows. This is backwards, and understanding the truth here will save you years of waiting for a feeling that may never arrive on its own. Motivation usually follows action, not the other way around. You do not need to feel ready to start. You need to start, and readiness will often catch up with you once you are already moving. Waiting for motivation before acting is like waiting for the fire to warm you before you light it. The warmth comes after the fire starts, not before. Deadlines, when used correctly, are one of the sharpest tools against delay. Not deadlines imposed by others, though those help too, but deadlines you set for yourself and treat as seriously as if someone else were watching. Tell yourself, this task gets a first draft by Thursday evening, not because it must be perfect, but because it must exist. A rough version finished on time will always outperform a perfect version that never gets started. Perfectionism is procrastination wearing a more respectable disguise. It convinces you that waiting for the right conditions, the right mood, the right amount of information is responsible caution, when really it is fear pretending to be wisdom. Here is something worth remembering on the days when starting feels almost physically difficult. The discomfort you feel before beginning a hard task is always larger in your imagination than it turns out to be in reality. This happens nearly every single time, and yet the mind never seems to learn the lesson permanently, which is exactly why the practice must be repeated again and again. You dread the difficult conversation for days, and once it happens, it takes 10 minutes and a weight lifts off your chest. You avoid opening the messy financial report for weeks, and once you finally look at it, you realize it was manageable all along. The task was never as heavy as the anticipation of the task. Anticipation is where suffering lives. Action is usually where relief begins. Build a habit of tracking small wins instead of only chasing big outcomes. Each time you take a small step you were tempted to avoid, acknowledge it, even briefly. This is not about empty self-praise. It is about training your brain to associate starting with reward instead of dread. Over time, this rewires the automatic response you have toward difficult tasks. Instead of your mind immediately searching for reasons to delay, it begins searching for the fastest way to just begin, because it has learned that beginning, leads to relief and progress rather than suffering. Environment plays a role here as well, just as it does with every other habit worth building. If your workspace is filled with distractions, your mind will use them as an escape route the moment discomfort appears. Clear your space of easy exits before you sit down to work. Put the phone in another room, close the extra tabs, remove the option to escape into something easier, and you remove one of procrastination's favorite tools. There is also a quiet kind of self-honesty required here that many people avoid. Ask yourself plainly, is this task actually important, or have I convinced myself it matters simply because I feel guilty for avoiding it? Sometimes procrastination is not weakness at all. Sometimes it is your inner sense telling you that a task does not deserve your time in the first place. The goal is not to force yourself into constant motion for its own sake. The goal is to stop avoiding the tasks that genuinely matter to the life you say you want to build. The people who seem endlessly productive are not immune to resistance. They feel the same pull toward delay that everyone else feels. The difference is, they have learned not to wait for that pull to disappear before they act. They have trained themselves to take the first small step while the fear is still present, instead of waiting for a courage that only shows up after the action has already begun. This is available to you as well, starting with the very next task you have been avoiding. Not tomorrow, not once you feel ready, but right now, for just 2 minutes, with nothing more required of you than a single honest step forward. Chapter 4. Strengthen your willpower through deliberate daily practice and repetition. Picture willpower not as a personality trait you either have or lack, but as a muscle sitting quietly inside you, waiting to be trained. This single shift in understanding changes everything about how you approach self-control. Most people believe willpower is fixed, that some individuals were simply born strong-minded, while others were born weak and scattered. This belief is comfortable because it removes responsibility. If willpower is fixed, then failure is not your fault, it is just your nature. But this belief is false, and clinging to it quietly keeps people stuck for entire decades of their lives. Like any muscle, willpower grows through resistance, not through comfort. You do not build physical strength by avoiding weight. You build it by lifting something slightly heavier than what feels easy, again and again, until your body adapts. The mind works the same way. Every time you choose the harder right action over the easier wrong one, even in something small, you are adding a small amount of resistance training to your inner strength. Skip the extra snack you did not need. Get up 2 minutes earlier than comfortable. Sit with a difficult emotion instead of numbing it immediately with distraction. None of these moments look impressive from the outside, yet each one is a rep, quietly building the same inner muscle you will need later for far bigger challenges. There is also a limit to how much willpower you can draw on in a single day, much like physical energy runs low after enough exertion. This is why the discipline you show in the morning often erodes by evening, when you find yourself reaching for things you swore off just hours earlier. Understanding this is not an excuse to give up on self-control by nightfall. It is a reason to be strategic about where you spend your limited willpower. If you know your mental energy fades as the day goes on, protect your most important decisions and hardest tasks for the hours when your mind is freshest. Do not save the difficult, disciplined choices for the exhausted version of yourself at 11 at night. That version of you was never built to win that particular battle. One of the most overlooked truths about willpower is that it is heavily influenced by decision fatigue, the quiet exhaustion that builds from making too many choices in a single day. Every decision, no matter how small, spends a little bit of your mental reserve. What to wear, what to eat, how to respond to a message, whether to check your phone one more time. By the time evening arrives, many people have spent so much decision-making energy on trivial matters that they have nothing left for the choices that actually shape their future. This is why disciplined people often simplify their lives on purpose. They remove unnecessary decisions so their willpower stays available for the choices that truly matter. Eat similar meals during the week. Lay out your clothes the night before. Decide in advance what time you will start working, instead of debating it fresh every single morning. Every decision you remove is willpower saved for something that deserves it more. Deliberate practice is the difference between people who possess strong self-control and those who merely wish they did. Strength does not appear from wanting it. It appears from repeated, intentional exposure to controlled difficulty. Athletes do not become powerful by occasionally lifting something heavy when they feel like it. They follow a structured practice, showing up on schedule, applying consistent resistance, and allowing recovery in between. Willpower training follows the same structure. Choose one specific small area of discipline and practice it deliberately every single day, not randomly, not only when convenient, but as a fixed commitment. Perhaps it is finishing every task you start before checking your phone. Perhaps it is speaking honestly instead of taking the easier path of a comfortable lie. Whatever you choose, the specific area matters less than the consistency you bring to it. There is a particular kind of discomfort that must be understood clearly if willpower is ever going to grow stronger, and that is the discomfort of delayed reward. Nearly every undisciplined pattern in a person's life exists because the immediate reward outweighs the future benefit in the mind at the moment of choice. The extra hour of sleep feels better right now than the workout does. The distraction feels better right now than the focused work does. Willpower is essentially the ability to place more value on your future outcome than on your present comfort, even though your present comfort is screaming louder in that exact moment. Training this skill requires practicing small delays on purpose. Wait 10 minutes before checking a notification that pulled at your attention. Wait until after a meal to have the dessert you were craving, and notice that the craving often fades once it is no longer immediate. These small delays teach your mind a powerful lesson, that an urge is not an order, and waiting does not destroy you, it strengthens you. Recovery matters here just as much as it matters in physical training, and this is something people often ignore when trying to build mental toughness. Constant, unrelenting demand on your willpower without any recovery leads to burnout, not strength. This does not mean giving yourself permission to abandon discipline the moment things get difficult. It means building genuine rest into your life so your capacity for self-control has room to rebuild. Sleep deprivation, chronic stress, and neglecting basic needs all quietly drain the very resource you are trying to strengthen. A person running on exhaustion will lose almost every willpower battle, not because they are weak, but because their reserves were empty before the challenge even began. Protecting your sleep, your nutrition, and your recovery time is not a departure from discipline. It is one of the most disciplined choices you can make. Language shapes willpower more than most people realize. There is a meaningful difference between telling yourself, "I can't," and telling yourself, "I don't." When you say, "I can't eat that," your mind hears restriction, and restriction breeds resentment and eventual rebellion. When you say, "I don't eat that," you are speaking as someone whose identity is already aligned with the choice, not someone fighting against a rule imposed from outside. This small shift in language reduces the internal argument your mind puts up, because you are no longer negotiating with a rule, you are simply acting in line with who you already are. Willpower also strengthens dramatically when it is tied to a reason larger than momentary comfort. A vague goal like, "I want to be disciplined," rarely survives a hard moment, because it carries no emotional weight strong enough to outlast temptation. But a reason tied to something you deeply care about, protecting your health for the people who depend on you, building the life your younger self prayed for, proving to yourself that your word actually means something, carries enough weight to hold steady when the moment gets difficult. Before you begin any period of deliberate willpower practice, take a moment to connect it to something that matters to you on a level deeper than convenience. This connection becomes an anchor you can return to on the days when giving up feels easier than continuing. There will be days when your willpower fails you completely, and this needs to be said honestly rather than glossed over with empty positivity. You will give in. You will make the easier choice when you knew the harder one was right. This does not mean your training has failed. Failure is part of the exact process that builds strength, in the mind just as much as in the body. What determines your long-term outcome is not whether you fail on a given day, but whether you return to the practice immediately afterward, instead of letting one lapse convince you the entire effort was pointless. Every strong person you have ever admired has failed at self-control more times than you will ever know about. The difference is, they kept showing up to train the muscle anyway, trusting that repetition, not perfection, was always the real path to strength. Willpower is not a mystical gift handed only to a fortunate few. It is a skill built through deliberate, repeated practice, strengthened by rest, protected by simplified decisions, and anchored by reasons that matter deeply to you. Every small act of resistance you choose today is quietly building the strength you will rely on tomorrow, in moments far bigger than the ones you are training on right now. Chapter 5. Overcome distractions to protect your focus and energy. Somewhere in the middle of a task that actually matters to you, a small buzz interrupts your thinking. You glance at it, telling yourself it will take 5 seconds. 20 minutes later, you resurface, having read 3 unrelated things, replied to a message that could have waited, and completely lost the thread of what you were originally doing. This happens so often that most people no longer even notice it happening. It has become the normal texture of daily life, but normal is not the same as harmless. Every one of these small interruptions is quietly stealing something you can never fully get back: your attention, and with it, your energy. Focus is not simply about ignoring your phone. It runs much deeper than that. Focus is the ability to direct your mental energy toward one thing and hold it there, even when a dozen smaller, easier, more entertaining options are calling for your attention at the same time. This ability has become rare, not because people are less capable than they used to be, but because the modern world has been engineered, quite deliberately, to fracture it. Every app, every notification, every headline is designed by people whose job is to capture your attention and hold it for as long as possible. You are not imagining the pull. It is real, and it is intentional. Understanding this is the first step toward reclaiming your focus, because you stop blaming yourself for weakness and start recognizing that you are fighting against systems built specifically to defeat your concentration. There is a hidden cost to distraction that most people never calculate, and it is far more expensive than the few seconds a notification appears to take. Every time your attention shifts away from a task and back again, your mind pays a tax. Researchers call this switching cost, but you do not need a scientific term to recognize it in your own life. You know the feeling of sitting back down after a distraction and needing several minutes just to remember what you were even doing, let alone regain the depth of thought you had before the interruption. If this happens 10 or 20 times throughout your day, you are not simply losing small moments here and there. You are losing entire hours of quality thinking, hours you will never see reflected on a clock, but will absolutely feel in how little you actually accomplished by the time evening arrives. Energy and focus are far more connected than people usually admit. Constant distraction does not just waste your time, it drains you in a way that pure work rarely does. A person who works with deep, uninterrupted focus for 2 hours often finishes feeling accomplished and clear-headed. A person who spends those same 2 hours bouncing between a task and their phone often finishes feeling foggy, restless, and strangely exhausted, despite having done far less. This is because fractured attention creates a low hum of mental tension your mind never gets to release. Every open tab, every unfinished thought, every half-read message sits in the background of your mind, quietly consuming energy even when you are not actively thinking about it. Protecting your focus is not only about getting more done, it is about protecting the actual quality of your mental and emotional state throughout the day. Reclaiming focus starts with an honest audit of where your attention currently goes without your permission. Most people underestimate this dramatically until they actually look at it directly. For a few days, notice every time you reach for your phone without a clear reason, every time you open a new tab out of boredom rather than need, every time your mind drifts towards something unrelated to the task in front of you. Do not judge yourself harshly during this process. The goal is simply awareness, because you cannot change a pattern you refuse to see clearly. Once you notice how often and how automatically these pulls happen, the scale of the problem becomes impossible to ignore, and that clarity becomes the motivation needed to actually make a change. The most effective solution is rarely more willpower in the moment of temptation. It is designing your environment so the temptation has less power to begin with. This principle matters here just as much as it does anywhere else discipline is built. If your phone sits within arm's reach while you work, you will check it, regardless of how firmly you intended not to. If notifications are turned on for every app, your attention will be interrupted constantly throughout the day, without you ever consciously choosing those interruptions. Put the phone in another room during focused work. Turn off notifications for anything that is not truly urgent. Close every browser tab unrelated to your current task before you begin. These changes feel small, almost too simple to matter, yet they remove the constant low-level battle of resisting temptation and replace it with an environment where focus becomes the easier, more natural choice. Time blocking is one of the most practical tools for protecting deep focus, and it works because it gives your mind permission to fully commit to one thing at a time, instead of quietly worrying about everything else waiting on your list. Choose a specific window, even just 25 or 30 minutes, and commit to working on a single task with total attention during that window. No phone, no unrelated tabs, no half-formed thoughts about other responsibilities. When the window ends, take a short break, let your mind rest, and then begin the next block. This structure works because your brain finds relief in boundaries. An open-ended task with vague focus invites distraction, but a clearly defined block with a start and end point creates a kind of pressure that sharpens concentration rather than scattering it. There is also an internal form of distraction that deserves just as much attention as the external kind, and it often gets overlooked entirely. Even in a perfectly quiet room with no phone in sight, your own mind can pull you away from the task in front of you through worry, unfinished conversations, or unrelated plans drifting through your thoughts. This kind of distraction cannot be solved by turning off notifications, because the interruption is coming from within. The solution here is often as simple as keeping a small notebook nearby while you work. The moment an unrelated thought appears, whether it is a reminder to reply to someone or an idea for something else entirely, write it down in a single sentence and return immediately to your task. This small act tells your mind the thought has been captured and will not be forgotten, which allows your attention to release it and return fully to the present moment. Protecting your energy also means being honest about what you allow into your mind outside of work hours, because focus during the day is heavily influenced by what you consumed the night before and the morning of. A mind that spends the evening scrolling through arguments, outrage, and constant stimulation rarely wakes up calm and ready to concentrate. This does not mean you need to eliminate every form of entertainment or connection from your life. It means noticing the difference between content that restores you and content that leaves you more scattered and anxious than before you opened it. Choose what enters your mind with the same care you would choose what enters your body, because both shape how clearly and calmly you are able to think. Single tasking deserves far more respect than it currently receives in a culture that treats multitasking as a badge of honor. The truth is that the human mind does not actually multitask in the way most people believe. It switches rapidly between tasks, and every switch costs a small amount of quality and focus. A person who believes they are being efficient by answering messages while working on an important project is often doing both tasks worse than if they had simply done one at a time. Real depth, real quality work, real meaningful thinking only happens when your full attention is placed on a single point, without division. Choosing to do one thing at a time is not slower. It is often dramatically faster, because the work produced during focused attention requires far less correction and revisiting than work produced while distracted. There will be moments, even after you have built strong habits around focus, when distraction still pulls at you. This is not evidence that you have failed. It is evidence that you are human, living in a world engineered to fracture attention at every turn. What matters is not achieving a state of permanent, unbreakable focus. What matters is noticing the pull sooner each time, returning to your task a little faster each time, and treating your attention as the valuable, limited resource it actually is, rather than something to be given away freely to whatever asks for it loudest. Every time you choose to protect your focus, even in a small, unremarkable moment, you are reclaiming a piece of your energy and your life that the world was quietly trying to take from you without your notice. And that reclaiming, repeated daily, becomes one of the quiet, powerful foundations of a disciplined and clear-minded life. Chapter 6. Embrace discomfort as the doorway to real growth. There is a particular sensation that shows up right before every meaningful change in a person's life, and almost everyone mistakes it for a warning sign instead of what it actually is, an invitation. It is the tightness in your chest before a hard conversation. It is the burn in your legs on a run when your mind begs you to stop. It is the awkward silence of trying something new and doing it badly in front of others. Most people spend their entire lives organizing everything around avoiding this exact feeling. They choose the safe job over the meaningful one, the comfortable silence over the honest conversation, the familiar routine over the unfamiliar path that might actually lead somewhere better. Discomfort gets treated as the enemy, when in reality it has always been the doorway. Nothing you currently value came to you without some version of this feeling attached to it. Think about anything you are genuinely proud of, a skill you built, a relationship you fought to repair, a goal you achieved after multiple failed attempts. None of it arrived easily. Somewhere along the way, you had to sit with frustration, uncertainty, or fear, and instead of running from it completely, you moved through it. This is not a coincidence. This is the actual mechanism of growth. The body and mind only adapt and strengthen in response to demand. Without resistance, without some form of productive strain, nothing changes. A muscle that is never challenged stays exactly the same size. A mind that is never challenged stays exactly as limited as it already is. Comfort preserves you exactly as you are. Discomfort is the only thing that has ever made you more. This is precisely why so many people stay stuck in lives that quietly disappoint them. Not because they lack ability, and not because opportunity never appeared in front of them, but because the moment growth required discomfort, they turned back toward what felt safe. Nobody consciously chooses to shrink their own life. It happens gradually through thousands of small retreats from discomfort that eventually harden into a permanent identity. The person avoids one hard conversation and then another, until avoiding conflict becomes who they believe they are. The person quits one difficult pursuit when it gets hard, and then another, until quitting under pressure becomes their unconscious default. None of this happened through one dramatic decision. It happened through repeated, quiet retreat, and it can be reversed the exact same way, through repeated, quiet advance. Understanding the difference between harmful pain and productive discomfort changes everything about how a person approaches growth. Harmful pain signals real danger, an injury, a genuinely toxic situation, a threat to your safety or well-being. This kind of pain deserves respect and often requires you to stop or seek help. Productive discomfort is different. It is the ache of unfamiliar effort, the awkwardness of being a beginner, the vulnerability of being honest, the fatigue of pushing slightly past what felt easy. This kind of discomfort is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that change is actually happening. Learning to tell these two feelings apart is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop, because confusing them keeps people either recklessly ignoring real danger or needlessly avoiding the very discomfort that would have made them stronger. Consider what happens inside a person the very first time they choose discomfort deliberately, instead of avoiding it out of habit. Maybe it is finally having the conversation they had been avoiding for months. The moments leading up to it feel unbearable, heart pounding, palms sweating, mind racing through every possible bad outcome. And then it happens, and it is over, and almost without exception, the anticipation was worse than the event itself. This experience repeats itself so consistently across every area of life that it deserves to be treated as a law rather than a coincidence. Anticipation exaggerates. Reality rarely matches the size of the fear that came before it. Once a person experiences this truth directly, rather than simply hearing about it, something shifts permanently in how they relate to future discomfort. They stop believing the exaggerated warnings their mind produces before every difficult moment, because they have proof, gathered from their own life, that those warnings were never entirely accurate. Seeking out discomfort on purpose, in small, controlled doses, builds a kind of resilience that cannot be developed any other way. This does not mean recklessly creating chaos or suffering unnecessarily for the sake of suffering. It means deliberately choosing small challenges that stretch you slightly beyond your current comfort on a regular basis, so your capacity to handle difficulty grows steadily over time. Take a cold shower for the last 30 seconds, instead of stepping out the moment it gets uncomfortable. Speak up in a meeting when staying quiet would have been easier. Sign up for something you are not naturally good at, and allow yourself to be a visible beginner in front of others. None of these actions need to be extreme. What matters is the repetition of choosing difficulty on purpose, because each time you do, you prove to yourself that discomfort is survivable, and that proof becomes the foundation for facing larger challenges later. There is a quiet kind of courage required here that has nothing to do with the absence of fear. Many people wait to feel brave before attempting something difficult, believing courage is a feeling that must arrive first. But courage was never the absence of fear. It was always the willingness to act while the fear is still present. The people you admire most for their resilience were not unafraid in their difficult moments. They were terrified, uncertain, and uncomfortable, and they moved forward anyway. This distinction matters enormously, because it means you do not need to wait for fear to disappear before you take the step that scares you. You only need to take the step while the fear is still there, and let the courage reveal itself through the action rather than before it. Growth almost always requires a period of feeling worse before you feel better, and this needs to be said plainly because it is often left out of conversations about self-improvement. When you begin exercising after months of inactivity, your body aches in ways it did not before you started trying to improve it. When you begin having honest conversations after years of avoidance, relationships often feel more tense before they settle into something more genuine. When you begin building a new skill, your performance often feels worse than it did when you were comfortably unskilled and unaware of your own limitations. This temporary decline is not evidence that you made the wrong choice. It is evidence that you disturbed a system that had settled into stagnation, and disturbed systems always feel unstable before they reorganize into something stronger. The people who quit during this phase mistake temporary difficulty for permanent failure. The people who continue through it are the ones who eventually reach the other side. Reframe how you speak to yourself in these uncomfortable moments, because the language you use directly shapes whether you interpret discomfort as danger or as progress. Instead of thinking, "This is too hard, I should stop," try thinking, "This is hard because it is working." Instead of thinking, "Something is wrong," try thinking, "Something is changing." This is not about pretending discomfort feels pleasant, because it rarely does. It is about accurately interpreting what the discomfort actually means, so you stop treating every difficult sensation as a red flag demanding retreat, and start recognizing many of them as green lights indicating real growth is underway. There is also a deep sense of self-respect that develops in a person who consistently chooses discomfort over the easier path, a kind of quiet confidence that cannot be faked or borrowed from anyone else. It comes only from proof, gathered through direct experience, that you are someone who does hard things, even when no one is watching, and even when your mind begged you to quit. This confidence does not depend on external validation because it was never built through comfort or applause. It was built through repeated evidence that you can face something difficult and come out the other side intact. This is the version of self-trust that carries a person through the genuinely hard seasons of life, the losses, the failures, the unexpected obstacles, because by then, discomfort is no longer a foreign, terrifying experience. It is simply familiar territory, something you have learned, again and again, how to walk through. The next time discomfort shows up in your life, whether it arrives as fear before a difficult conversation, fatigue during a demanding task, or the awkwardness of trying something new, resist the old instinct to retreat immediately toward whatever feels easier. Pause, notice the sensation without immediately obeying its pull to stop, and remember what it actually represents. It is not a wall meant to keep you out. It is a door, uncomfortable to open, slightly resistant on its hinges, but leading directly toward the version of yourself you have been trying to become all along. Chapter 7. Design a powerful morning routine that fuels your day. The way you wake up rarely gets the credit it deserves for shaping everything that follows in your day. Most people treat the first hour after opening their eyes as dead time, something to rush through on the way to what actually matters. They grab their phone before their feet even touch the floor, and within minutes, their mind is already reacting to messages, headlines, and other people's demands before they have had a single private moment to decide what they actually want from the day ahead. This is not a small mistake. It sets a pattern that repeats itself for the next 16 hours, a pattern of reaction instead of intention, of letting the outside world drive instead of steering yourself. A morning routine is not about waking up at an impressive hour or performing an elaborate list of habits to look disciplined. It is about claiming the first part of your day for yourself before anyone or anything else gets access to your attention. Think of it as closing a door, just for a short while, between you and the noise of the world, so you can arrive at your day already centered, instead of already reacting. The specific activities matter far less than most people assume. What matters is the order of operations, protecting your mind before you hand it over to emails, notifications, and other people's priorities. Begin by understanding why the first choice of the day carries so much weight. The moment you wake up, your willpower is at its highest point, rested and ready, before the demands of the day have had any chance to wear it down. Whatever you choose to do with that first surge of mental energy sets the tone for how the rest of the day tends to unfold. If the very first action is scrolling through other people's opinions, arguments, and curated highlights, you are spending your freshest mental energy on input you did not choose and cannot control. If the very first action is something aligned with your own goals and values, even something small, you are spending that same energy building the life you actually want. The choice feels tiny in the moment, yet it echoes through everything that follows. Delay the phone, even if only by 20 or 30 minutes. This single change produces a noticeably different quality of morning for almost everyone who tries it honestly. Without the phone pulling at your attention immediately, you create a small window of quiet where your own thoughts, rather than someone else's, get to lead. Use this window deliberately, even if you are unsure at first what to do with it. Silence often feels uncomfortable to a mind accustomed to constant stimulation, but that discomfort fades quickly, replaced by a clarity that most people forgot was even possible before breakfast. Movement early in the day changes far more than your physical body. It changes your mental state in ways that are difficult to fully appreciate until you experience it consistently. This does not require an intense workout or an hour at the gym. Even a short walk outside, a few minutes of stretching, or a handful of simple exercises sends a clear signal through your entire system that you are awake, capable, and ready to engage with the day rather than passively drift through it. Movement wakes up more than muscles. It wakes up focus, mood, and a sense of readiness that sitting still simply cannot produce on its own. Hydration deserves more attention than it typically receives in conversations about morning routines, largely because it seems too simple to matter. After many hours without water, your body wakes up in a mild state of dehydration, and this alone can produce sluggishness, brain fog, and low energy that people often blame on tiredness rather than what it actually is. A full glass of water first thing, before coffee, before anything else, restores something basic your body has been missing all night. It is a small act, but small acts done consistently are exactly what build the kind of quiet discipline this entire book keeps returning to. Give yourself a moment of stillness before the demands of the day begin pulling at you from every direction. This does not need to be formal meditation if that feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable. It can be as simple as sitting quietly with your breath for a few minutes, noticing the thoughts that arise without immediately chasing after each one. This practice trains the same mental muscle discussed earlier in this book, the ability to notice a thought without being controlled by it. Doing this early in the day, before pressure and stress have built up, makes the skill far easier to access later, when you actually need it, during a stressful meeting or a difficult conversation. Write down what actually matters today, not everything you could possibly do, but the small number of things that would make the day genuinely worthwhile if nothing else got done. Most people carry a mental list so long and vague that no single item on it ever feels urgent enough to prioritize, so the entire day gets filled with reactive tasks instead of meaningful ones. Narrowing your focus to a short, specific list, written down where you can see it, turns a vague sense of busyness into clear, deliberate direction. This single practice alone has quietly transformed how countless people experience their days, not because the list itself holds any magic, but because clarity always outperforms chaos. Notice how differently a day unfolds when it begins with intention instead of reaction. A person who protects their morning tends to move through challenges with more patience, because they entered the day from a place of calm rather than immediate stress. A person who protects their morning tends to make better decisions by evening, because their mental energy was not drained hours earlier on things that never truly mattered. This is not coincidence or magical thinking. It is the direct result of choosing, deliberately, how the first moments of energy and attention get spent, rather than surrendering them by default to whatever demands your attention loudest. Building this kind of morning does not require perfection, and expecting perfection from the very first attempt is one of the fastest ways to abandon the entire practice within a week. Some mornings will not go as planned. You will oversleep, or life will interrupt the routine entirely, and that is simply part of being human, rather than evidence that the practice has failed. What matters is returning to it the next morning, without turning one missed day into an excuse to give up on the entire structure. Over time, even an imperfect, inconsistent version of a protected morning outperforms no structure at all, because it plants a seed of intention in a part of the day that would otherwise be handed over freely to noise and distraction. The way you begin each day is quietly teaching you who you are becoming. A morning spent reacting to the world teaches you to be someone who is led by circumstances. A morning spent in quiet intention, even briefly, teaches you to be someone who leads their own life instead. This lesson repeats itself every single day, whether you notice it or not, and the version of your morning you choose tomorrow is already shaping the version of yourself you will meet a year from now. Chapter 8. Transform setbacks into fuel for your personal comeback. There is a moment that arrives in every meaningful life, Sooner or later, when everything you were building suddenly falls apart, the business fails, the relationship ends, the health scare arrives without warning, the plan you spent years preparing collapses in a single afternoon. In that moment, something inside a person is tested more honestly than at any other point in their journey. Not their talent, not their intelligence, not even their previous discipline, but something quieter and far more decisive, how they choose to interpret what just happened to them. Setbacks themselves do not determine the direction of a life. The story a person tells themselves about the setback does. Two people can experience nearly identical failures, lose the same job, end the same relationship, fail the same exam, and walk away with completely different futures, not because one person suffered less, but because one person decided the failure meant they were finished, while the other decided it meant they were simply not finished yet. This distinction sounds small when spoken aloud, yet it is the exact hinge on which entire lives swing in opposite directions. Understand something clearly before moving forward. Pain from a setback is real and deserves to be felt honestly, not rushed past or covered over with forced positivity. Pretending a painful loss does not hurt is not resilience. It is denial wearing a brave costume. Real strength does not skip the pain. It walks directly through it, eyes open, without pretending the wound is not there. Give yourself permission to grieve what was lost, whether that is a relationship, an opportunity, a version of your future you had already imagined in detail. Suppressing this grief does not make a person stronger. It only delays the reckoning, often until it resurfaces later in far more damaging ways. Once the initial pain has been honestly acknowledged, a choice appears, quiet but unmistakable. This choice is where the entire direction of a comeback either begins or dies before it starts. The choice is this: does the setback become a verdict on who you are, or does it become information about what needs to change? A verdict says, "I failed, therefore I am a failure. This is simply who I am, and there is nothing left to do but accept it." Information says, "This attempt did not work. Here is what I can learn from it, and here is what I will do differently moving forward." The event is identical in both cases. The internal response determines everything that happens next. Consider how differently a setback feels once it stops being treated as an ending and starts being treated as data. Data does not carry shame. Data simply informs the next decision. A person whose business failed can either decide they are simply not cut out for building anything, or they can examine precisely what went wrong: pricing, timing, execution, marketing, and treat each mistake as a specific, correctable lesson rather than a permanent character flaw. The failure is the same. The relationship to the failure is entirely different, and that relationship determines whether the person tries again with more wisdom or quits permanently with more shame. There is a particular kind of quiet courage required to look directly at your own role in a setback without collapsing into either denial or self-destruction. Denial says, "None of this was my fault. External circumstances alone caused everything, and there is nothing for me to learn here." Self-destruction says, "All of this was entirely my fault. I am fundamentally broken, and I deserve to suffer for it indefinitely." Neither of these responses leads anywhere productive. The honest middle path says, "Some of this was within my control and some was not. Here is what I could have done differently, and here is what I genuinely could not have predicted or prevented." This balanced honesty, difficult as it is to reach, becomes the foundation every real comeback is built upon. Time plays a role here that deserves respect rather than impatience. Immediately after a significant setback, clarity is almost never available, no matter how badly a person wants it. The mind is still processing shock, grief, and disruption, and expecting sharp, wise decisions during this period often leads to worse choices made from a wounded, reactive state. Give yourself permission to move slowly in the immediate aftermath. Rest before rebuilding. Grieve before strategizing. The comeback does not need to begin the same day the setback occurred. It needs to begin when you are actually ready to build something real, not simply to prove something quickly out of wounded pride. Once genuine readiness arrives, and only you will know when that moment comes, the real work of a comeback begins with a single specific action, rather than a sweeping, dramatic reinvention. Many people try to rebuild their entire life at once, after a major setback, believing the size of their effort must match the size of their pain. This almost always backfires, because massive, unfocused effort collapses under its own weight before it produces any real momentum. Instead, choose one small, concrete action connected to the life you are trying to rebuild, and complete it. Send one application. Have one honest conversation. Take one small step toward the health you are trying to reclaim. This single action does something psychologically significant. It proves to a wounded mind that forward motion is still possible, even in a small, quiet way. Momentum after a setback rarely arrives as a sudden burst of inspiration. It arrives slowly, built from a series of small proofs that you can still function, still choose, still move forward despite the wound. Each small action stacks on top of the previous one, and gradually, almost without noticing the exact moment it happened, a person realizes they are no longer simply surviving the setback, they are actively building something new because of what they learned from it. This is the quiet mechanism behind every genuine comeback story, not a single dramatic moment of triumph, but a slow accumulation of small, deliberate choices made in the aftermath of pain. There is also a particular kind of strength that only becomes available to a person after they have survived something they once believed would destroy them completely. Before the setback, confidence was theoretical, based on assumptions about what a person could handle. After surviving it, confidence becomes evidence-based, built on the undeniable fact that they faced something devastating and did not disappear. This new kind of confidence carries a weight that untested confidence never can, because it was earned through direct experience rather than assumption. This is why so many people who have faced serious setbacks eventually describe them, with genuine honesty rather than forced positivity, as the exact turning point that led to a stronger, clearer, more capable version of themselves. None of this means setbacks should be welcomed or sought out deliberately, nor does it mean the pain they cause should ever be minimized or rushed. It means that when a setback inevitably arrives, as it does in every meaningful life without exception, the response to it matters more than the setback itself. The event only marks an ending. What happens afterward, the honest grief, the specific lessons extracted, the small first actions taken while still hurting, determines whether this becomes the story of a person who stayed down, or the story of a person whose comeback became the very thing that defined the rest of their life.